Good afternoon, children.
Good afternoon.
We were discussing about the accessory ducts found in human male reproductive system. So we'll be continuing with that. And once we complete a human male reproductive system, we'll have an oral test based on chapter 2. So I'll be repeating the point what we were discussing before winding up. Accessory ducts, they play an important role in the transport of sperms. So you know which are the different accessory ducts: rete testis, vasa efferentia, epididymis, and vas deferens. They help in transporting sperms from testis where it is being formed to outside through urethra. And the pathway also we discussed. Once again, I will say seminiferous tubules. You know that inside the testis, each testis around 250 testicular lobules are there, and in each testicular lobule, 1 to 3 highly coiled seminiferous tubules are present. These tubules will open into rete testis. They are also tubules with irregular cavities. Rete testis they open into vasa efferentia. Vasa efferentia is also a series of fine tubules, 15 to 20 you can find in each testis, and they lead into epididymis. And the speciality of, definitely it helps in the transport of, or it conducts sperms. And at the same time, epididymis is an organ or a structure where the sperms are stored temporarily. And epididymis open into vas deferens, and this vas deferens you can see it will ascend, it will move upward into the abdominal region, and then it will loop over the urinary bladder, and they join with the ducts of seminal vesicle and prostate gland, two seminal vesicles and one prostate gland. So they will join with the ducts of these two glands, and they will form a common ejaculatory duct. And this common ejaculatory duct merges with urethra, which opens out by urethral meatus. And this is the pathway of sperms. And these are the regions through where the sperms travel before they are ejected outside. Once again, seminiferous tubules, they will open into rete testis into vasa efferentia, leads into epididymis into vas deferens. Vas deferens will join with the ducts of seminal vesicle and prostate gland and join and form a common ejaculatory duct which merges with urethra, and that opens out by the opening known as urethral meatus. Okay, that was about the accessory ducts. Urethra originates from the urinary bladder. So just like in any human being, both males and females, you know that urinary bladder is a structure where urine gets stored and it will be released out through the urethra. So urethra will be originating from the urinary bladder, and in human males it will extend through the penis into its external opening known as urethral meatus. The opening of urethra is known as urethral meatus, and in both males and females urinary bladder leads into urethra, which opens out by urethral meatus or urethral opening. But in males, this urethra originates from the urinary bladder, and they will be extending through the penis to its external opening, that is urethral meatus, or else you can say urethra or urethral meatus. It's a common opening for both urine and sperms. Hope you have understood. Shall I proceed to the next slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Moving on to the next one, accessory glands. So paired testes we completed. Accessory ducts are also over. Moving on to the third part, accessory glands. There are different glands which are associated with human male reproductive system. Some of the glands you're familiar with: prostate gland and seminal vesicles, single prostate gland and two seminal vesicles, and a pair of Cowper's glands or bulbourethral glands. Same gland, Cowper's or bulbourethral, both are same. As I told you earlier, you should know, you should be familiar with both the names. So accessory glands include prostate gland, seminal vesicles, Cowper's gland, or bulbourethral glands. They secrete their secretions. Already the role of the secretions of seminal vesicle and prostate gland you have learned in class 10, and the secretions of all these glands or their collective secretion you call as seminal plasma. And the seminal plasma is rich in fructose. It's a sugar, it's a nutrient medium, calcium, and different enzymes. So bulbourethral glands, seminal vesicle, and prostate gland, they release some secretions, and their secretions are together known as seminal plasma. And what is the composition of seminal plasma? It consists of fructose, sugar, then calcium and enzymes. So what is seminal plasma? Seminal plasma is a collective secretion of different accessory glands like prostate gland, seminal vesicles, Cowper's gland or bulbourethral glands. And when sperms are released into the seminal plasma, or along with the sperms, seminal plasma, you call it as semen. So semen consists of sperms along with seminal plasma, and the seminal plasma provide nourishment to the sperms, enable them to move or helps in their locomotion. Once again, there are different accessory glands associated with male reproductive system: bulbourethral gland, seminal vesicles, and prostate gland. All these glands, so from the name, a gland itself, you know that they are capable of some secretion. They can secrete something, only then we call them as glands. And their secretions are collectively known as seminal plasma. And seminal plasma, along with sperms, you call it as semen. And seminal plasma consists of fructose, calcium, and enzymes. Okay. Now, functions of seminal plasma. What role do they perform? Helps in transporting or makes their locomotion easier, provides nourishment or nutrients to the sperms. And one more point. First 2 points you've learned in class 10. And the third point, the new point, what you're going to learn is it provides an alkalinity. It gives an alkaline medium so that it can manage the acidity of the uterus. Uterus has got slightly acidic nature. So these sperms, because of the alkalinity of seminal plasma, they'll be able to withstand the acidity or neutralize the acidity of uterus when these are released into the female reproductive tract. Once again, the different functions performed by seminal plasma, since they contain fructose, calcium, and all, they provide nourishment to the sperms, enables their locomotion or promote or help in their locomotion. This particular fluid will facilitate the locomotion or transport of sperms, provides nourishment to them, and apart from that, they provide alkalinity so that they can withstand the acidity of uterus. And apart from that, Cowper's glands or bulbourethral glands, it helps in the lubrication of penis to facilitate the copulation process. And secretions of epididymis, vas deferens, seminal vesicle, and prostate glands. All these are essential for the maturation and motility of sperms. So we learned 3 functions of seminal plasma. Apart from that, bulbourethral glands, specifically, their secretions will help in the lubrication of penis. And then secretions of epididymis. So these all we learned under accessory ducts. Secretions of epididymis, vas deferens, Seminal vesicles and prostate glands are essential for the maturation and motility of sperms. Okay. So the different accessory glands include prostate gland, seminal vesicles, bulbourethral glands, and their secretions. Together, we call it a seminal plasma. It's rich in substances like fructose, calcium, and enzymes. And seminal plasma, along with sperms, you call it as semen. And the different functions of seminal plasma, three functions. It helps in or it facilitates the transport of sperms, provides nourishment to them, provides alkalinity to counteract or neutralize this acidity of the uterus. Then apart from that, we learned the specific function of bulbourethral glands. It facilitates the lubrication of penis, and the collective secretion of epididymis, vas deferens, seminal vesicles, and prostate gland are essential for maturation, for the development, as well as the motility or movement of the sperms. Okay. And we are moving on to the last part of male reproductive system, that is external genitalia. So under externally, the genital, external genital organs. So under that, the organ penis is included. External genitalia comprises of penis. Penis is a copulatory organ which helps in copulation, and it is made up of spongy tissue which is erectile. So it's a copulatory organ, means it will facilitate the act of copulation or mating, and it's made up of erectile spongy tissue. And this spongy tissue, so here I said it's an erectile spongy tissue, and when the spongy tissue gets filled with blood, it erects, and this will facilitate insemination. Insemination, I already mentioned, it's a transfer of sperms or semen into the female reproductive tract. So insemination is brought about by penis. And the cone-shaped tip of the penis, you call it as glans penis. At the same time, there is a fold of skin which is covering it. You call it as foreskin. So you need to learn two terms associated with penis. One is glans penis and the second one is foreskin. What is glans penis? The cone-shaped tip of penis is known as glans penis, and it is covered by a fold of skin, and that is known as foreskin. So once again, the last part of the male reproductive system, we have completed paired testis, accessory ducts, accessory glands, and the last one is external genitalia. External genitalia comprises of penis. Penis is a copulatory organ. It's made up of erectile tissue. And when this organ gets filled with blood, it gets erected, and this erection will facilitate the process of copulation, enabling insemination or a transfer of semen consisting of sperms into the female reproductive tract, and that can lead to fertilization. And coming to the structure of penis, it has got a cone shaped tip, and you call it as glans penis, and it is covered by a loose fold of skin, and that is known as foreskin. Foreskin, glans penis, both the terms are associated with penis, and with that we have completed male reproductive system. Okay, any doubts? Do you have any doubts, children? So male reproductive system, we'll start, sorry, female reproductive system, we'll start next class. So we have 35 minutes for our oral test. So 5 minutes I will give you for a quick recap, and after 5 minutes, 2:30, I'll start asking. Any doubts in this? Do you have any doubts? Whether
No,
it is
ma'am.
yes or no, I want you to respond. Nandana can keep quiet for some time because only you respond. What about others? Others don't have tongue?
No, ma'am.
No, you don't have tongue. Then something has to be done. Anna?
Ma'am,
No means no doubts or no tongue? No doubts.
No doubts, ma'am.
Oh, very good. So 5 minutes for you to revise. You don't want 5 minutes. You're ready to answer my question. We'll directly start our oral test. You want 5 minutes? Do you want? For that
Yes,
also
ma'am.
no answer. And all should turn your videos on. Sharon has messaged me. Anthony, Rijas, Punya. Once I start, no excuse. Okay, take 5 minutes for a quick recap and then we'll be beginning with our. Okay, we'll start with the oral test. And I want you to close your textbooks, no reference. You should not refer from your textbook or lecture notes. Keep everything closed. In a plant, which structures are known as the sites of sexual reproduction? Steffi?
Flowers.
Okay. And which are the male and female reproductive parts of a flower? Lydia, male and female reproductive parts.
Stamen.
Yet another name you had learned. Another name you learned. Oh? Stamen or a layer of stamens will form what? Michael? A typical flower has got two parts. Apart from petals and sepals, the male and female reproductive parts. These two terms, I think 11th also you've learned. I'll give you a clue. It starts with A and G.
Gynecium and
Gynecium
the medium.
And the medium, that was last year. Andrecium and gynecium. And Michael, which is the female part out of these?
Christoph. Gynecium.
Gynecium. Gynecology. Okay, because that deals with the diseases found in females. So similarly, you remember the term gynecium, andrecium and gynecium. Andrecium is the male reproductive part and gynecium is the female reproductive part. And andrecium has got two parts. Which are they, Sania?
Anther and filament.
Anther and filament. Actually, andrecium consists of a whorl of stamens, and stamen has got two parts, filament and anther. And give me the details of the transverse section of anther. If you take a transverse section of anther, what are the parts you see? Give me the details. Nandana?
The transverse section of an anther consists of two lobes. An anther is
What type of structure it is? As such, how does it look like?
tetragonal structure, four-sided.
Okay. Yeah.
On each corner, there is a microsporangium.
Very good. Then.
Each microsporangium, each lobe has two microsporangia.
Okay. Now, Vidur, what happens to these microsporangia? What for they are present inside the anther? What will happen to these microsporangia later? What is the role? Why are they present? What will happen to them? Or they will develop into dash? Malavika?
They develop into pollen sacs.
Containing, and that will be filled with
Pollen
what?
grains.
Pollen grains. Give me the structure of a typical microsporangium. You learned that 4 microsporangia will be present at the 4 corners of anther, and the microsporangia will develop into pollen sacs, and this pollen sacs will be filled with pollen grains. So inside the pollen sac, there will be pollen grains. Now my question is, explain the structure of a microsporangium. Naureen.
It is surrounded by 4 walls, epidermis, endothelium.
How do they look like externally?
They are circular in nature, and
Ah.
it is surrounded by 4 wall layers, epidermis, endothelium, middle layers, and tapetum.
Okay, enough. Give me the function of these different layers, Donna. What function these layers perform?
The outer three layers,
Ah.
they help in the dehiscence of anther
Ah.
to produce pollen grains, and the tapetum, which is the inner layer.
Where are you looking?
I'm looking.
On your right side, something is there, Donna?
No.
No. Textbook is kept open? Printed notes are there on the right side? No. Okay. Continue.
And the tapetum is the
No,
inner layer.
repeat it once again. The outer three layers will help in?
The outer three layers will help in the dehiscence of anther to produce pollen grains,
And
and
also
the
provide?
tapetum, which is the inner layer,
Helps
nourishment.
in dehiscence. Apart from that, it also provides P, starting with P.
Pollen grains.
No, it provides wall layers, outer wall layers. What could be the function?
Protection.
Protection. They provide protection, and it will also, these layers will also help in the dehiscence of pollen to release the dehiscence of the anther to release the pollen grains. And one layer, one specific layer we learned, that is tapetum. What function do tapetum perform? Anthony, what is the role performed by tapetum?
Nourishes pollen.
They nourish the developing pollen grains. What is special about this tapetum? Structural features. Rijaz,
Tapetum are dense cytoplasm and
and?
usually multinucleated.
Okay. What is meant by microsporogenesis? Next one, Nevin. What is microsporogenesis? Genesis means formation. So it's easy to say. Microsporogenesis.
By the process of mitosis.
Louder.
It is a process of formation of microspores by mitosis.
Mitosis?
Meiotic division.
From where?
From
where are they formed, microspores?
Anther.
There is a specific name, not the entire anther.
Tapetum.
Nevin. Anna, what do you call that cell?
Pollen mother cell.
Pollen mother cell. Nevin, now you complete the sentence.
The formation of microspores by meiotic division from mother cell.
What mother cell?
Microspore mother cell.
What mother cell? She said like that. What was that, Anna?
Pollen mother cell.
Microspore mother cell or pollen mother cell. Okay, PMC, pollen mother cell. That is microsporogenesis. Okay. Now, each pollen grain is surrounded by two layers. Which are those two layers? Anna?
Exine and indine.
And tell me the difference between these two layers in terms of the substance with which they are made of. Naureen?
Exine is made up of sporopollenin, and indine is made up of cellulose and pectin.
Very good. And what is special about exine? What is its speciality? What is the unique feature of exine? Sharon?
It has highly resistant organic material, so it can withstand
It is made up of highly resistant organic material. What is its name?
Sporopollenin.
Sporopollenin. Then?
And it has strong acids and alkalines.
Yes, it has
strong acids, and it can withstand high temperature.
First part I did not get. It can withstand high temperature. Agreed. First part, what did you say?
It has strong acids and
It has strong acid or it can resist
it can resist strong acid and
alkalis, and then
alkalis.
it's highly resistant. Okay. And does it form a continuous layer, Sharon? Sporopollenin throughout you can see sporopollenin.
No. It
Then?
has a germ pores.
Some gaps in between, some apertures in between. You call it as
Germ pores.
why germ pores are they?
It has a minute opening
Why? Why are they present?
to release food materials.
Is it to release food material, Punya? What is the significance of germ pores in the exine layer?
The pollen tube germinates from there.
It is through these germ pores that the pollen tube germinates. Otherwise, being very resistant and hard material, it will be difficult for the pollen tube to emerge out. Okay. And we learned that pollen grain consists of two cells. Which are those two cells? Meenakshi,
Vegetative cell and generative cell.
give me the details.
Vegetative cell is bigger in size and it have abundant food materials in it and also irregular shaped nucleus.
Okay. And generative?
Generative cell is smaller in size and is found in the cytoplasm of it floats in the cytoplasm of the vegetative cell and it has a dense cytoplasm and a nucleus.
Okay. And it is said that in more than 60% of the angiosperms, pollen grains will be shed at the 2-celled stage. And in the other 40%, it will be shed at the 3-celled stage. So why you need to explain this statement? Why some are released at the 2-cell stage? What do these 2 cells signify? And how these 3 cells are being formed? I'll repeat the statement once again. In more than 60% of the angiosperms, pollen grains will be shed at the 2-cell stage. And in others, it will be shed at the 3-cell stage. Explain the statement. Nia?
In others, the generative cell divide mitotically to give rise to the 2 male gametes.
You're reading? Are you reading, Nia?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Then repeat it again. But the way you were saying the answer, I felt you're reading. Okay. Repeat it once again.
In others, the generative cell divides mitotically and give rise to 2 male gametes.
So altogether, how many cells?
3 cells.
Which are those 3 cells? 2 male gametes and? How come 3 cells? 2 male gametes plus what? Which cell is dividing into 2 male gametes, Nia? Nia is not there. Nia went. Lydia, just explain it again. I'll make it simple. You listen here. In more than 60%, the pollen grains will be released in the 2-cell stage. What are these 2 cells? Lydia, what are the 2 cells of a pollen grain?
Vegetative and
generative cell. And in almost 40%, they will be released at 3-cell stage. What are these 3 cells?
male, 2 male and
2 male gametes. Then third one.
One egg.
1 egg. In the pollen grain, in the male gamete itself, with that egg, they are moving to ovule. Think and say. In a pollen grain, vegetative cell and generative cells are present. And which cell is forming male gamete? Which cell is undergoing division and forming male gametes? Say something, Lydia. Which cell is dividing? Generative cell or vegetative cell?
Vegetative cell.
Malavika, just explain.
The generative cell divides into 2 male gametes.
And
So-
altogether, how many cells?
3 cells.
Which are those 3 cells?
2 male gametes and 1 vegetative cell.
Okay. So 1 vegetative cell and 1 generative cell are present in 2-celled stage. But those pollen grains which are released in the 3-cell stage, they will have 1 vegetative cell, but the generative cell will divide and form 2 male gametes. So 2 male gametes plus vegetative cells altogether 3. You're not thorough. This is how you're going to revise, means I am wasting the time. What are the advantages of storing pollen grains? So before that, you tell me, how can it be stored? How can the pollen grains be stored, Michael? How can the pollen grains be stored? What is the technique? How do you store it?
Not sure.
How can you say I'm not sure? If you have revised, I'm not asking you GK. Am I asking you any GK? Whatever is there in the textbook only I'm asking. And since 1 week I've been telling you to revise, and this is how you have come. If you're not sure, it's okay. But whatever, even if you're unsure, tell me the answer you know. Whether it is correct or not, I will see. Having read. How can you come like this? Half an hour, we're just wasting for this. If you have learned, it is of use. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time. Rijas, how do you store pollen?
In liquid nitrogen at minus 196 degrees Celsius.
And what are the uses of storing them, Anna? What are the uses of storing pollen?
Be used in the seed seed program.
This is what happens. Either you have by hearted, or else what is happening is in between you're peeping into the book. So here and there, 1 or 2 words you're seeing and you're trying to repeat it. And you're making it a mess. That is what is happening now. In between, you are peeping into the textbook or I don't know where. Yes, Anna?
No, ma'am.
Or else you haven't understood the meaning. Who will tell me? Vidur?
They are used as pollen banks.
You can store them as pollen banks, just like seed banks, and we can use them in
Crop breeding programs.
What happened there? So when the class is not there, or means when your turn is not there, I think you are listening to music.
No, ma'am. My father called. That's it.
Anna, repeat the answer.
They can be stored in pollen banks.
They can be stored as pollen banks and can be used in
which
program? Which program?
Crop breeding programs.
Somebody is helping you from there. Who is
No
there
one.
next to you?
No one.
On your left side, who is there? Tell me who is sitting on the left side.
No, ma'am, no one. I am alone.
Oh, I believed. What is the difference between monocarpellary and multicarpellary pistil? Who will say? Naureen?
In monocarpellary, only one pistil is there, and multicarpellary, more than one pistil is present.
And answer this also. What is the difference between apocarpus and syncarpus pistils?
Syncarpus means the pistils are fused, and in apocarpus they are free.
Okay. What is meant by funicle? What is funicle? Who Who will say? Nandana, what is funicle?
It is a stalk-like structure that connects the ovule to the placenta.
Placenta. Good. And what is hilum, Dona?
Ma'am, what?
Hilum, Hilum.
Junction connecting funicle.
Junction connecting
Funicle.
funicle with
Ovule.
The junction where ovule fuse with the funicle is known as Dona?
Hilum.
Hilum. And there are several integuments, protective covering for this ovule, outer and inner integuments, all that we had learned. And what is meant by monosporic development? Vidur, what is monosporic development?
It is the formation of one megaspore.
Formation of one megaspore.
Formation of one megaspore.
Gayatri. What is meant by monosporic development?
This is the formation of the embryo sac from a single functional cell where the three are
Single what? That has got a significance. Monosporic. Tell me about the name of the spore.
megaspore.
Single functional megaspore is known as monosporic development. The formation of embryo sac from a single functional megaspore is known as monosporic development. How many meiotic divisions are needed for forming 100 seeds? You know how seeds are being formed. Seeds are the products of fertilization. When a male gamete fuses with female gamete only, seeds are formed. Okay. Means embryo will be, zygote will be formed, zygote develops into embryo, and finally seed formation will take place. So how many meiotic divisions are needed for the formation of 100 seeds? First, you can find out how many meiotic divisions are needed for the formation of one seed. Then you can multiply by 100. It can come as for the formation of 200 seeds, 250 seeds, 400 seeds. The number can change. But if you know how many meiotic divisions are needed for the formation of one seed, you will definitely get the answer for any number of seeds. So try to do, and based on the formation of megaspore, microspore, there lies the hint or clue for this answer. Megasporogenesis, microsporogenesis. How many megaspores will remain functional? How many microspores formed will remain functional? So the answer is there in these, in these statements, the answer is lying hidden. So try to find out the answer. And I'll give you 5 minutes. It's means 2:55, 3 o'clock we'll wind up. And next class also, I'll be continuing with this oral test. I'm not at all satisfied with your performance today. Next class, I'll continue from where we have stopped today. Okay. And if you don't revise and come, I'll call your parents. No excuse for that. Immediately after the class, I'll make a call to the parents. So no need of giving any excuses at that time. So today, anyway, I have given the excuse. I'm totally disappointed. I thought you all might have learned since you got so much days. So many days you got. Next day, don't repeat this. If you don't answer my questions, repeatedly, if you don't answer my questions in next session, I'll definitely inform your parents. Let them also be informed about your performance. Okay, so try to do this without the help of Chrome. You will do on your own. Think, use your brain. Okay, now listen here. There it is asked 100 seeds. Okay, these type of questions I've seen in several question papers. 100 seeds to be formed. And for one seed, let's take the case of one seed. For one seed to be formed, we need one male gamete and one female gamete. Am I right? One male gamete and one female gamete are needed for fertilization to take place. Means zygote should be formed, and it is from the zygote embryo will be developed, which will gradually form seed and the fruit. Okay. So here, for forming one male gamete, how many meiotic divisions are needed? Or we'll start with female gamete. For forming one female gamete, how many meiotic divisions? One meiotic division. Because when one meiotic division is completed, we get 4 megaspores. And out of this, 3 will degenerate. 3 degenerates and only 1 remain. 3 will degenerate and only 1 will remain functional. So 1 meiotic division will lead to 1 female gamete. Now, coming to male gamete. As a result of 1 meiotic division, how many male gametes are formed, children? Anyone? Vidur? Vidur? He vanished. Malavika?
4.
4. Are all these 4 functional? Are all the 4 functional, Malavika?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So from this, what did you understand? One meiotic division, we get 1 egg. One meiotic division, we get 4 sperms or 4 male gametes. 4 male gametes. Okay. So for forming 100 seeds, we need 1 male and 1 female gamete. Okay. So for forming 1 female gamete, we need only 1 division. Okay. Here 1 by 4 plus 1. These are the total number of division. 1.25 divisions are needed for the formation of 1 seed. So for 100 seeds into 100, 125 meiotic divisions. So this can be 125 for 100. So based on that, you can find out the number of divisions for 400, 200, 600. 600 seeds. Have you understood, children?
Ma'am, the last part I didn't understand.
Because the problem is not only about Steffi, I'm saying in general, you had a confusion with this because you didn't learn today for the revision. Okay, so when meiotic division takes place, you know that for the formation of megaspores, when meiotic division takes place, you know that 4 megaspores will be formed, 3 will degenerate, only 1 remain functional.
Ma'am, so is it why we took 1 by 4?
No, I'll tell you. Wait. See, for forming 1 female gamete or 1 egg, 1 meiotic division is needed. 1 meiotic division will take place. 4 megaspores will be formed. 3 degenerate, 1 remain functional. So 1 meiotic division is equal to 1 egg. Is it clear? 1 meiotic division is needed for the formation of 1 egg. Now take the case of microspores, which will lead to the formation of male gametes. When 1 meiotic division takes place, we get 4 microspores, but these 4 are functional. All the 4 are functional. All the 4 can develop into male gametes. But in female, it was not like that. 4 megaspores are formed, 3 degenerate, 1 remain functional. But in case of microspores, which will lead to the formation of male gamete, 1 meiotic division, 4 male gametes. All the 4 are functional. Okay. So here for one seed formation, we need 1 male gamete and 1 female gamete. So just see the case of one seed. For one seed, how many divisions are needed? We need, for formation of one seed, we need 1 female gamete, 1 male gamete. For forming 1 female gamete, 1 meiotic division. Okay. For forming 1 male gamete, do we need 1 division? No. 1 division will lead to 4. We need only 1. So 1 by 4. So 1 and 1 by 4 divisions are needed, or 1.25 divisions are needed for the formation of one seed. So keep that in mind and multiply. Now 100, so 1.25 into 100, 125 divisions. If it is 200, 1.25 into 200, you get 250. Got it? Understood? Have you understood, children?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Shall I wind up?
Yes, ma'am.
If not, I will explain it next class. But do revise and come from where we stopped today. Okay? Thank you.